The U.S. war on drugs does not serve these interests. Why? Who wants to pay $40 billion in taxes to support a vast, often corrupt government bureaucracy, when instead one could be generating tens of billions of dollars in profit every year? It makes no sense. Why does the United States benefit from having $1 billion a year black market economy in Colombia that provides funds for the FARC and for the paramilitary and other people who create disruption and who attack oil pipelines? It makes no sense from a U.S. economic or strategic interest. Years ago, I worked in the State Department. I went around the world interviewing drug enforcement agents, DEA agents, for my own research. I talked to many, many people. In a way, the war on drugs is viewed by many Americans, even in the government, as a burden we must carry because of our own crazy religious attachment to prohibition. And what that means, of course, is that ending prohibition, that building the political movement to end prohibition, must be one of building alliances across borders, and building alliances from the left to the right, and building alliances between workers and businessmen, and building alliances between and law enforcement. It must be a matter of building alliances between all people who see that prohibition is fundamentally a destructive element in all our societies, and who perceive that the risks of legalization, because they are risks, and they are real risks of legalization, that nonetheless, those risks of legalization do not approach in magnitude the harms generated by prohibition today and in the future. It is understanding that in pursuing reform, we must have a vision of what the alternative regime looks like. We must have a vision of the alternative drug control system. We must have a vision of a drug control system around the world grounded not in the ignorance and fear, the prejudice and the profit that drive the current prohibitionist system, but instead a vision grounded in science, compassion, health, and human rights. Now, this is undoubtedly a very dark time in all our societies. We are struggling. In the United States, people don't know what is the right thing to do about the war in Iraq. They don't know how to fix our economy. We don't know if we will be subjected to horrible terrorist episodes in the future that may kill thousands or hundreds of thousands of Americans. I live in New York City. "10 miles from my home used to be the two World Trade Centers. There's an element of fear and insecurity within my country today, unlike anything I remember in my lifetime. Unfortunately, we have a government in power today that is extraordinarily scary. We have one party that now dominates all three branches of our government: the White House, both houses of Congress, and the Supreme Court. Something that has rarely happened in American history. And within that party, many of the most reactionary elements, many of the most extremist elements in that party are the principal force. They are both responding to and playing on fears in my own country about our safety and about our future well-being. This will not continue forever. In the United States now, for the drug policy reform movement, the reactionary forces in Washington are so powerful that we can accomplish nothing in Washington. So we are planning for the future. We are beginning to push for changes in the states and in the cities. We are pushing for changes in laws in California and New Mexico and Hawaii and Washington and New York and Connecticut and states around the country. We are taking the opportunity to educate those politicians who, when they regain power, may in fact take greater steps in the right direction. But there is a blossoming movement for reform in the United States. We are beginning to gain a little bit of power. Politicians are beginning to listen to us. Then look in Europe. In Western Europe, where you saw beginning 20 years ago, and in the Netherlands even longer ago, a growing movement for harm reduction. A movement based on the recognition that drugs are here to stay. A movement based on the recognition that we will never be a drug-free society, that there has never been a drug-free society, and that it is extraordinarily dangerous even to strive to attain a drug-free society. That striving is an invitation to totalitarianism. So you look in Europe now, and what you see happening is the dominance, the growing power of the public health institutions over the criminal justice institutions. You see treating addicts in a more humane and science-based way. You see heroin addicts being prescribed not just methadone, but even pharmaceutical heroin. You see easy access to sterile needles to reduce the spread of AIDS and hepatitis and other infectious diseases. You see the movement with cannabis slowly backing in, step by step, from cannabis prohibition to decriminalization of possession to de facto regulation of distribution, and ultimately we hope towards the de jure, towards the real regulation and legalization of cannabis.